Since Techland's original Call of Juarez came out, they've been working hard to create a sequel. It was obvious that the story would focus now on the adventures of Ray and his brothers Thomas and William during their early pursuit of the ancient treasure of Juarez. Additionally, the developers looked at players' feedback and avoided the parts poorly received in the original. You guessed it, rip to the janky stealth sections and hello to more gunslinging. Thus, in 2009, Bound in Blood came out and offered us the peak cowboy experience. Let's get into it. Bound in Blood's event occurs 17 years before the original game. Ray and Thomas McCall are fighting side by side as part of the Confederate Army in Georgia. I remember that the first level involved fighting in the trenches, but I completely forgot about this little detail. But hey, at least they're good guys and want to save their family farm. Nothing bad's going on there, right? But I digress. As I mentioned, Techland took a long and hard look and realized that most players hated the stealth sections in the original game, so naturally they're not present here at all. I'd like to say that it's a great thing because those sections were indeed a chore to go through. But the issue wasn't that they existed, it was their execution that made them such a terrible experience. I thought they provided a bit of calmness to contrast the hectic gunfights. I'll say this from the start that the gunplay in Bound and Blood is just as good as the originals, but you will feel a bit overwhelmed by the non-stop shooting the game offers, and the first level doesn't do a great job of showcasing that. Firstly, it's because it primarily takes place in trenches. Not only because you can mostly move only forwards or backwards, but because of the cover system it goes out of its way to showcase. The ability to lean is gone and replaced with an automatic cover mechanic. You get close to an obstacle or the corner of a wall and your character positions himself against it. It looks nice in theory, but it's mostly a hassle in practice. Even during this level you'll suffer from the same issues as the rest of the game, which is that your camera aggressively bobs in random directions because you get too close to a prop that's considered a cover by the game. Good luck moving in a gunfight when your aim goes in all directions because the system relies on mouse movement to put you in and out of cover. The guns themselves are also an issue, at least for now. That's because there is now a visible progression system of the arsenal, with firearms in better and better condition coming up as you go further into the story. The better the gun, the better the damage, rate of fire or reload speed. Consequently, this means that the initial arsenal feels really crappy to use. I like the progression part, but there's a reason why there's a running cliche of starting games with the best loadout before being plunged back into the starting gear. Hell, even the original Need for Speed Underground did it. In the first few levels, I generally thought the gunplay was poor overall because of this, and only in the later levels I started enjoying the experience to its full potential. Then there's the issue of the color palette. I complained about the original having enemies that blend into the environment, but Bound in Blood is even worse in this department. The entire game has a brownish tint applied over everything, making enemies even harder to spot. God forbid you fight in caves and other dark places. I would have hoped that the brown color filter would be just a metaphor for how the war was going on for the Confederates, but all the game has it. Even forest mountains look excessively brown for how much vegetation is in front of your eyes. The first level puts you in the shoes of Ray McCall on the outskirts of Atlanta. For some reason, it hints at the possibility of choosing which of the two brothers you play as, even if you can only select Ray, but I'll get to that part later. In the process of being shown several gameplay mechanics like the earlier mentioned cover system, you're acting like a one-man army. Clear the soldiers flanking the trenches, kill the snipers, go around the forest and flank the enemies and break through, protect and blow up the bridge with a cannon and then a Gatling gun. It reminds me of the days of Ramirez protecting Burger Town. You get barked orders all the same too.
Right, take the other Gatling gun!
After realizing that Colonel Barnsby left them out to dry despite successfully holding the line, the two brothers promptly decided to desert and go to their family's farm to protect their mother and younger brother. That's great! The McCalls are principled family men and only joined the Confederate forces to defend their farm. That puts all my worries to bed.
Look, They slaughtered Jackson's cattle. Slaves? Slaves?
Hey, what's that? Oh, don't tell me you're about to make me do what I think. Ah, thank goodness, they're just Union soldiers. They couldn't have been doing that kind of stuff. No way the devs would portray the McCalls as... Ah, never mind. Moving on from that, this level isn't particularly great. It tries to showcase Thomas's ability to use rifles better since you're playing as him here. Besides the second to last level where you get to play as both, the rest of the campaign will let you choose between the two, so at least there's that. This level has many open spaces and plays a bit boring compared to others. It gets better from here on in, thankfully. After liberating the farm, Ray and Thomas discover that their mother died the night before. Stricken with grief and on the run due to their recent desertion, the two take their brother William on a quest to rebuild their fortunes and helpfully rebuild the family farm. We already know how all this turned out, but it's still interesting to witness how things went down. In particular, when it comes to the strong bond between the three brothers. They're all hell-bent on sticking with one another, with Ray and Thomas in particular looking like a menacing duo that would move mountains for one another. William, on the other hand, is a broken record. Being a priest, he keeps pestering his two brothers to give up their violent ways, and his intentions are good, but by God is he annoying. I'm half tempted to shoot him right now to get him to stop.
You just killed a U.S. federal marshal. Don't you know they're gonna hunt you down to the ends of the earth? Dear Lord, how do I free my brothers from Satan's embrace? What words do I use to convince them that the Lord loves and forgives them? There's only one decent way for God-fearing people to make their fortune. With hard work and sacrifice. I don't know who you two are anymore. My brothers
Please,
do not
just
need
stop,
more blood on their
no.
hands.
Of course, not all is fine and dandy between Ray and Thomas. As they arrive in a border town at the edge of Arkansas, the sheriff is looking for blood. The reason? One of the McCalls slept with his daughter, of course. To make the plot thicken even more, Ray fancied the girl as well, but Thomas is the one who got her.
By the way, brother, if you ever steal another woman away from me, I swear to God I will take your life. You understand me?
This moment also brings up the new and revamped duel mechanic. Oh boy, it's such an improvement. In the original Call of Juarez, I complained that the feedback was lacking, since drawing a gun relied on violently pulling your mouse down and hoping your cursor went where you wanted it to go. None of that is in Bound in Blood. Now you have a camera focused on your gun holster and your adversary in the background. Your mouse movement corresponds with the position of your hand, which is visibly going for the gun when the time comes to shoot. Since there's no leaning to complicate things, you must now move left or right to keep your opponent as close to the center of the screen as possible. Said movement also makes your hand move away from where you kept it, so until the bell rings, you must keep moving your hand as close as possible to the holster while keeping in mind where your opponent is while you rotate. It's a remarkable improvement over the first game and nice to play. It's not perfect, of course, because the background music varies, making it difficult to know when the bell's about to ring. In some cases, the music stops a few seconds before, which makes it easy to understand, but unfortunately, in other duels, the music keeps going. It's not the end of the world, since you quickly figure out when to reach for the gun. Doesn't change that the duels are pretty satisfying overall. This level is also the first that gives you the choice between which McCall to play as. Each has their strengths and weaknesses alongside abilities and weapons exclusive to either Ray or Thomas. For example, Ray can dual-wield pistols, throw dynamite sticks and break doors open. The last part, unfortunately, only works on doors that are meant to be open. The hundreds of closed doors you'll pass by are just textures you can't interact with. Additionally, Ray is tougher thanks to the iconic metal plate armor he's carrying on his chest. Because of this, Ray is well set up for being a mean killing machine, able to pop in and quickly dispatching his opponents. On the other hand, Thomas has the bow, the ability to aim more accurately with a rifle, throwing knives, and can use the lasso to access new areas. The bow is still strong, but not as broken as it was in the original, thank goodness. The knives are cool, but not the most effective if you ask me, and finally, the increased accuracy of the rifle is welcome. However, you must aim down the sights for a few seconds while standing still to take advantage of that, something which you can't really do in the middle of a gunfight. As almost everyone else did, I played the entire game as Ray. It's not just because he's obviously the most interesting character given he's in the original title, and that's not to say that Thomas is uninteresting either. He's just more of a regular Western character with no fluff to him. But the more significant issue is that the game's design matches Ray's strengths and not Thomas's. First of all, firefights are brutal on hard difficulty and aren't forgiving if you overexpose yourself. The health system of the original game was replaced with the regeneration mechanic that is much maligned in the genre. You get shot, tomato sauce splatters on your screen, and after a while it clears up and you're ready to fight again. I'm not a massive fan of the system, but I can understand why it's here. The first game became very frustrating when you had very low health before progressing through sections where damage was next to impossible to avoid. In Bound in Blood's case, there's also the pacing to consider. As I mentioned earlier, it's a constant roller coaster of large gunfights with few to no breathers, so imagine how it would have screwed up things if you had to search for medkits every few minutes. The only compromise I can think of is to have health pickups that you store in your inventory and use at the press of a button, but it still doesn't maintain the pacing as well as the system that currently exists. Because of this brutal difficulty, Ray is well equipped to blast through, while Thomas not so much. You'd think that the stealth is an option given that the bow is present, but the levels are designed so that you just start firefights once you arrive in a new area, and fights involve a lot of enemies at the same time, in which case Thomas's inability to dual wield pistols is a big handicap due to how slow each pistol fires. At the same time, many levels are in close to medium quarters, so the advantage of aiming well with the rifle doesn't really matter. That's not even mentioning that Ray's aim with it is good enough anyway. Last but not least, the added mobility is not helpful in fights. That's because his ability to climb higher and Ray's ability to kick down doors only exists as a means to complete small puzzles. A high wall to climb means that Thomas goes around and helps Ray get over it, while a locked door means that Thomas steps aside and lets Ray kick it down. On the one hand, I'm glad the awkward platforming is gone, but on the other, it's a shame that you don't get many advantages in combat from climbing up high. After escaping spectacularly, the three brothers go to Mexico to search for the legendary treasure of Juarez. There they quickly get entangled with Juarez, the criminal, with Ray and Thomas both setting their eyes on his wife Marissa. Juarez is also looking for the treasure and first tasks the two gunslingers to take out a rival called Devlin. I'm only mentioning this because William comes up with all the worst cliches imaginable after the two brothers massacre the entire quarry.
Do not violate the word of God, the fifth commandment. Thou shalt not kill. Ray, if you kill him, you'll be just like him.
Oh, fuck right off with that.
It's not too late, it's not. When our Savior was nailed to the cross, there were two other men crucified alongside of him, murderers. And he took one of them to heaven because that man repented. He begged for forgiveness, and he was forgiven.
The Lord forgave him?
Yes.
A cold-blooded murderer?
Yes.
Well, hell, that's good to know.
What follows is one of the game's several semi-open world segments. You have some poster flyers with objectives to complete, you kill everybody in the area and get some money for your troubles. And you'll need it because Bound in Blood has shops where you can buy upgraded weapons. I never had problems getting all the best guns I wanted with the system, so all I have to say is that the system works as intended, I suppose. What follows is the development of the story's side plots. On the one hand, the chief of an Apache tribe, Running River, wants to start a war against the whites. Thus, he sends his half-white son on a quest to find the rifles needed, for which he is willing to trade the medallion that leads to the treasures of Juarez.
Puma's pa asks, who will sell us these rifles? The whites
Perhaps we can ask them to shoot themselves as well.
The first part that concerns McCalls involves rescuing the gunrunner who just got arrested by the Pinkertons. It just so happens that the gunrunner in question is none other than Colonel Barnsby, a fact known only by Juarez after the two brothers brought him back. Unknown to them, Barnsby forces Juarez to give up the two in exchange for the rifles. For you see, he wanted to execute all men who deserted at his command. After all, he only fought the war to protect his family.
My wife and children murdered in their beds.
See? See?
Meanwhile, subhuman animal
Oh,
now free to live among decent Christian folk. Free to do whatever they want. Fornication with our women. Miscegenation.
oh. Since he's hell-bent on remaking the Confederacy, it's good that he knows nothing about the Oh, come on, William! What follows is an escape from what's essentially a very vertical level. The brothers are rejoining Juarez, who is ready to transport the weapons back to the Apaches. The only issue is that the route goes straight through Comanche territory, which promptly ambushed the convoy. Barely escaping the onslaught, they finally reach the Apaches, who promptly confiscate everything and take Marissa captive, all because William revealed Juarez's treachery to Running River's son. Man, this kid is on a winning streak. While staying in the camp, the chief's son reveals his father's plan. Since he thinks this will bring the extermination of the village, he wants Ray and Thomas to steal the medallion for themselves. The only issue is that the medallion is at the bottom of a lake in the middle of Navajo territory. What follows is quite an enjoyable mission, partly because this and the previous level are welcome changes of scenery, with trees and lush grass as opposed to sandy rocks. But in this level's case, you get the chance to blow up a dam to scoop up the medallion. Kinda cool seeing how the lake gets slowly drained, I have to say. With the medallion in their possession, William is entrusted with it and its secret, since he suspects that the two older brothers are willing to kill each other for it otherwise. He's not far from the truth. Ray is becoming suspicious of his brother since Thomas learned about Juarez's broken and useless weapons from Marissa. All this after Marissa herself went to Ray and asked him to kill Juarez for her, making him think he has her affection. To fuel the fire, the chief's son tells them to fight for her affection to distract the tribe while he helps Marissa escape from captivity. With this, Ray puts things together and interprets it as Thomas stealing another woman from him. Unfortunately for them, the beatdown between Ray and Thomas is interrupted by Barnsby and his troops bombing down the tribe. They end up massacring the entire village, capturing Running River's son and urging the chief to give him the medallion in exchange for his life. In an attempt to rescue him, the McCalls descend upon the meeting place, but they arrive too late as the colonel shoots the hostage. With his dying breath, the young brave discloses that Juarez kidnapped William and took him to his fort. And here comes one of the most challenging and longest levels. That's because you get to play as both brothers. Since I never played with Thomas before, I had to deal with the issue of having starter guns in my inventory since I didn't get to buy him any new gear. This makes the level start especially difficult since all hell breaks loose once you get into Juarez's fort. Thankfully, the devs learned some lessons from the original game and peppered the courtyard with objects to hide behind instead of leaving it empty. And it doesn't take long until you get your hands on guns that are at least decent. Thomas's job is to gather horses for the getaway while Ray goes into the dungeon to rescue William. The plan is thwarted when Marissa tells Thomas that William was killed and begs to leave Ray behind and go straight for the treasure. What she didn't know was that the shooting she heard was from Ray saving William at the last second. Trying to escape, Ray faces Juarez in what will be the first of many duels from which he miraculously escapes with his life.
I'm looking for him.
Let him be, Ray. Come on.
Yeah, William, this surely won't backfire like half of the stuff you said until now. Once he realizes Thomas betrayed him, his blood boils and he is more than determined to murder his kin.
Look, a way out. God protect us.
God!
Arriving at the treasure, the two brothers draw guns on each other, and we finally get to see the iconic moment of William's sacrifice. In his attempt to once and for all guide Ray away from the path of violence, he chooses to sacrifice himself. It's a shame he's an annoying broken record for the rest of the game, because his last act is genuinely good character development. Already hurt by being forced by Juarez to murder another man while in captivity, young William senses that this is the only way to atone for his own sins. It's a great moment, even if it doesn't even reach the level of emotion Mark Alamo's narration of the events had in the first game. It's a shame that this is spoiled by the sudden appearance of Barnsby, who miraculously was let go by Running River and then, even more miraculously, found the treasure without the medallion or guidance of any kind. At least he gets quickly dispatched at the end of an annoying boss battle. Then we're treated with a super happy ending, with Ray showing that he's changed his ways and became a preacher, and that he married Thomas and Marissa.
And though nothing is like it used to be, one thing remains: we are still a family.
But yeah, let's forget how dysfunctional this one turned out to be.
Like my dear stepfather, who knocked the tar out of me at least once a day, rain or shine. He said he was teaching me how to be a man, but all he taught me is how to take a beating. Thomas! You get away from her, you bastard! You hear me? I'll kill you!
So there you have it. Bound in Blood does a great job as a prequel. Despite having an already known conclusion, it still manages to bring out a lot of complexity to the story. I also commend that Techland took their time to address quite a few topics in more depth than the original game. For one, it does an admirable job covering the end of the Civil War and its outcome. In reality, many famous outlaws of the time were former Confederate soldiers who were destitute after the conflict's end. Not only that, but the ravages of war deeply impacted the psychology of the combatants, which can be seen in our two protagonists. Sure, we don't have the basis to compare from before the war, but everyone around them is shocked by how the war changed them. Barnsby is a bit comical on the other hand. Let's be honest, the man thinks he can magically conjure up an army to defeat the US government with the help of a long-lost Aztec treasure. What else is there to say about it? It also touches more on the dynamics and life within the Indian territories. Running River's disdain for whites comes from the death of his family at their hands. His son was made with a captured white woman, and because of his hatred for them, he couldn't fully accept him as one of his own. Realizing all too late that his warpath could only mean destruction for his people, he becomes calm water and retires to a life of peace and meditation. It's a nice character arc and connection to the original game. Last but not least, it's the story of two brothers who become increasingly distant to the point they turn enemies. I would like to say it's not an original concept for a story, but as far as video games are concerned, you can count them on the fingers of your hand. It is slightly disappointing that Ray's speech doesn't offer as many exciting moments as it did in the first game, and I suspect it's partly caused by Mark Alamo's more advanced age that took some of the strength of his voice. At least, that's how it sounds to my untrained ear, and it's only speculation on my part. It's a shame he doesn't bring more epic speeches, but he still has a fair share of good moments.
Or maybe it was both of us.
Oh, shut up, Ray. That girl does like a good time.
Thou shalt not kill.
Well, it's a little late for that, little brother. Look around. How come you're in such a hurry to die?
As far as gameplay is concerned, there's been a huge improvement over the original. There's no more jank to speak of, since this game has much more polish. Anyway, the experience is smooth as butter and without the bad moments of the first game. If you want to shoot people, you've got plenty of it here. Guns are loud, dust and smoke fly everywhere, and downing an opponent feels satisfying every time. Definitely one of the most solid first-person western shooters out there. It's excellent that Techland learned their lessons. That must mean that the resounding success of Bound in Blood can only lead to an even better third game, right? Right? Oh god, it hurts so much! Thanks to everyone for watching this video. Take pot shots at the buttons and don't forget to share this with your like-minded fellows. And until next time, cheers!